Silo, Season 3, Episode 5 is here. We are halfway through the season, and I don't think this is the best episode of the season, but this episode definitely helps us get through some of the progression points that we've been waiting to get through. So I'm excited to talk about it here today as we move into the second half of Silo Season 3. This shit's flying by. Let's get into it. So the biggest story at this hour is, well, there's a couple big stories in all three of our main storylines. So you have the Juliet storyline, big developments there. You have the Daniel and Helen development, only one scene between the two, but a big development there at the end of the episode. And then you have the Orla Kent storyline, which I actually think picked up a lot of pace this episode and it kind of made what we were leading to make sense. You know, I was kind of shitting on them for including that stuff, but it's kind of leading to something that's interesting. So at least we have that as our like third storyline heading into the second half of this season. But we have to start off with Juliet. She's handed, and let's talk about freaking Robert Sims, man. MVP of this episode, and I'm worried for my boy, and we'll talk about that. I didn't even write that down in my notes, but that little stumble at the end on the stairs was that, you know, a little. At first I was like, is he okay? Is he going to die because Camille poisoned him, or was that because he had the Pez dispenser? I don't know, but I'm a little worried that Robert Sims will not make it to the end of the season. You know, he's too good right now. He's giving out he's playing all sides. I don't know if he's gonna make it, but the big moment is obviously him handing the Pez dispenser to Juliet, and finally halfway through the season we are over the memory block that Juliet had. She remembers everything, and we'll get into what that means moving forward in terms of what she's able to tell Robert Sims on the stairs in the open. I did notice. I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but where can this AI listen? We'll get into that, but big development there in the Daniel and Kellen thing. Somebody is driving a car for them. Crazy. We'll have to get into that to end off the episode. And then Orla Kent was helping track down the person who was stealing from both supply and critical supplies. That's the big reveal of this episode. And we also learn about critical supply. So a bunch of stuff to talk about today. Let's get into it. Episode 5, I thought was a decent episode. Not the best of the season, not the worst though. So let's get into episode 5, starting with the flashbacks. And I actually really like the way they do flashbacks in this show, where they start out with the scene in gray and black and white or gray, whatever. You know, I'm a little colorblind when it comes to that, but whatever it is, if it's in gray, you know, we get a couple seconds of it in gray, then it goes to real time. So like, okay, we're flashing back, and then we're here now in the present when it's in color, like watching them live it out through the past. So I like that little transition. They did that I think 2 or 3 times throughout this episode. Thought that was a decent way to do that. We start off with Knox and Shirley. Now we haven't seen. Still, we're 5 episodes in. We haven't even seen what happened to Bernard and Juliet when they come out of the airlock, and this shit was crazy, bruh. So they're in the airlock. You know, people are worried. This is right on the brink of the rebellion. You know, everyone kind of calmed down when Juliet came back over the hill, according to somebody who talked in this episode. I forget who said that, but they're just seeing Bernard and Juliet come over or come into the airlock, and Knox and Shirley immediately try to open that door. And Kennedy's like, "Yeah, get the door open." But there's a couple other people. I think some side characters. I think it's I forget what his name is. Maybe I don't know. Some side characters like, you don't want to open that. There's poison outside. But they're like, "Fuck that. We need to get Juliet back in here." So you have to love the respect and loyalty that Knox and Shirley both have for Juliet. They went crazy saving her. Knox freaking tears down a door, a metal door, and puts her on that as like a serving bed to get her down. Now, I never thought about this in terms of the silo, where medical is like super down below. So they make like a makeshift pulley system where they lower Juliet and Bernard both down to the medical place in order for them to receive treatment. I think it was Robert and somebody else who ended up helping. Or no, it was the sheriff and Hank maybe who ended up helping. So I need to learn the sheriff's name. The sheriff and Hank, I think, who ended up helping with Bernard. Not sure where like the official forces were, like where was the judicial people. You know, Robert, I guess, was in the vault with Camille, but crazy stuff as we see the actual thing here, and then we learn the truth of what happened. So as expected, I kind of mentioned this in last week, and I think everyone kind of knew this was coming up. Apparently there's a next week on in Silo. I learned that from my coworker. I've never even watched next time on of Silo until this week, but we learned Rob made a play to save Bernard. So Camille came home and said the AI wants Lucas, Kyle, uh, Juliet, and Bernard all dead. And Lucas Kyle's, you know, just gag him and bag him. We don't really care about him. But we need Bernard and Juliet dead. Whoever's willing to speak first. Robert is going to go with Bernard, apparently. But Robert actually makes a play. That's the moment he turns when he saw the AI. He gets shut out of the vault. It's him and his son. You know, I would have to give respect for Robert because I thought he was kind of just playing Patsy for a while. He has been playing Patsy basically this whole freaking show. First he's serving Bernard, and then he's kind of just in the whim of his wife. Now he's kind of just the shadow of the head of IT wherever he goes. So it's good to see him kind of carving out his own narrative, carving out his own storylines, and this is all getting super fast paced in the silo right now. So we'll have to figure out what happens with all these different competing interests going on. Well, they're kind of all aligned under one now. All of the kind of like rogue characters. We'll talk about that in a second. But Rob makes the play to save Bernard. He ties him up in plastic, fakes his death, cuts him a little mouth hole. Bernard's like geeking when he gets to the bottom of the incinerator, and he's like, "Why are you laughing?" He's like, "It's the drugs you gave me." Funny. That scene was, or this episode had a lot of like funny little moments that just made me laugh. I'm not gonna like recall all of them, but there was some like interesting stuff that happened. I was like funny at like the image of it. But yeah, Rob made the play to save Bernard, and we'll see if that pays off. I think that was definitely the right move, especially when you don't trust this AI voice blindly like Camille does. But I think Bernard actually gave some good context for the AI voice and why you need to trust it. Like you just think that's the only right thing to do. So I'm gonna give Camille a little bit of grief moving forward, Camille, but not too much. Not too much. So we finally get the answer to what Lucas told Bernard. That was my biggest question. I only watched season 2 a couple months ago when Lucas told Bernard something, and then Bernard freaked out, kind of seemingly gave up on life. The words he told him were, "They can kill us at any time," and this makes its way around this episode. A lot of people hear these words, "They can kill us at any time." So that's what Lucas told Bernard at the end of season 2. That made Bernard just kind of go tweak off. Like I remember, I looked up that video, like what did he say to him, and we never really got like the true answer of that, but we got it in this episode. So this episode did a good job of like tying up loose ends from the previous seasons and getting us ready for what's really going to happen, go down in the second half of this season. So with Bernard, Rob needs some help. Obviously, he can't do it. He's kind of the face of everything right now. I think by this time he's the head of judicial, so he enlists Walker and McClane. And this is a funny little dynamic. One of the funny moments I was talking about. You have Walker and McClane helping out Bernard throughout the duration of this episode. And it's just interesting to see Rob and Bernard, two characters who are used to being the villains of the show, aligned with all of our heroes and all the like side heroes like Kennedy, Lucas, Kyle. Everyone's in the same room, so that was interesting to see. But the dynamics between Walker and McClane and Bernard, who kind of did them super dirty in season 2. It's cool to see them play it out here and like kind of play barb at each other. Especially Bernard's like, "If you drop me, I don't care." Well, he says that later on to Shirley and Knox, but it's some funny banter, especially from Walker. McClane kind of is there at the beginning and then just kind of dips because she has her own little side task to do with Orla Kent, but we'll get to that in a second. Rob, instead of saving Juliet, he's like, "I got Juliet covered." He has the man go to the upstairs where Juliet is, and they're all outside waiting to see what happens outside of medical, and they all hear Bernard died. Juliet's still in there, and he's like, "Juliet for mayor," and that's the scene I remember that was on the next time. But that was cool to see like how that kind of took place. Obviously that's probably the opposite of what the Camille and the AI wanted in terms of Juliet. They just wanted her dead. But now you can't kill her because she's mayor, which hasn't really stopped anyone in the past. I remember, I think the first, season 1, like episode 3, the OG mayor died. That woman, I forget her name, but I don't know. I feel like in this case, I guess it makes sense why they wouldn't want to. I feel like you still could kill her if you want to. I mean, Camille literally put out a death order. I think at the end of season 3 or at the end of episode 3 was that. So I don't know. I feel like that was kind of a weak way of explaining how Juliet's going to live and whatever. She's mayor. I guess okay, fine. Anyways, so we learn the big part of this. Bernard is, spewing as he should. He's finally under the guise of IT, and I don't know where this AI voice listens to because it's in the basement when Lucas Kyle gets to the door, and it's in the vault with Camille, and it hears things going on. I don't know if it's only in those 2 rooms and is just told things by people, like, and then it like interacts based off what they tell him, or it's on the cameras and can hear everything told out loud. Because there is a moment where they're like, when they tell Shirley and Knox about this, all the silos and stuff, they're like, "You can't talk about this out loud." So, but Juliet says it on the staircase. So will there be like things coming back there? I feel like it's kind of inconsistent right now. At least I'm not paying super close attention to what this AI can hear. If someone can like enlighten me in the comments, where can this AI hear people? Is it out in the open? Is it in certain rooms? I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of confused on how that's going. But Bernard tells, obviously in the basement where Bernard is, it's unlikely like where the excavator is. It's kind of like the hidden spot. George was there. A lot of George this episode, which is cool to see. A flashback to season 1. But yeah, Bernard tells them in order to kick the drugs, the one thing that this order said, the order is the order that creates everything that runs in the silo. The pact is like the fake version of that. Doesn't really explain why. The order tells you the reasons why, and it's like that for the head of IT. So in order to kick the drugs of the memory loss, you need relics from the past. So this kind of adds into why they always are looking for relics and always trying to erase the past, because if you see them, it helps you, remember things. And obviously if there's rebellions and you're trying to make people forget, if they see the things from the rebellion, blah blah blah. You get the story of that. So that's why the relics are really highly well regarded as like these special items that need to be destroyed. And in the previously on, they did show Charlotte. They said in order for her to remember things, you need to see uh, relics from her past. So I'm curious to see how that ties in with both Helen and Daniel's storyline moving forward. And I don't know where we're going. We'll kind of touch on that with the Daniel and Helen scene at the end of the episode, but I don't know where we're going with that. I don't know what the pacing on that is at all. Anyways, fun moment, great moment here where I haven't always liked Robert. I feel like he, like I mentioned, he's been kind of a patsy for Bernard, but Bernard telling him he's indispensable was a great moment because he's been waiting for that his whole career of like following around. So that was super awesome to see Robert finally get his due, and I think he believed he deserves it. Robert was awesome this episode, pulling all the strings, making everything go the way it did, keeping everything secret. Keeping Juliet alive, keeping Bernard alive. He did a great job in this episode. Lucas Kyle's still alive, so I thought not Bernard, but Robert is awesome, and it's cool to see someone that he's always looked up to, Bernard, tell him that, even given the circumstances. I thought that was a great moment, underrated moment, probably in the grand scheme of things. So we have Walker. This is kind of, I feel like this, the way I would describe this is like a context episode where like we kind of just move things along in an interesting way, though. It's not like this was a boring episode, but it seems like we're kind of bringing in everybody now about this, what's it called? No, I can't remember, but the thing that can kill them all. What's it called? It's gonna bug me. But Walker tells Knox and Shirley about the safeguard, and also the other silos. So this seems like a mistake to me. Just knowing Knox and Shirley's past, especially Shirley, I feel like acts pretty irrationally. Especially at the beginning of this season, she tried to like ditch Juliet from not remembering her. I was not very happy with Shirley throughout the first couple episodes of the season, being like, I know it hurts, but come on, she can't remember anything. Anyways, I feel like this could potentially be a bad idea, but it does seem like Knox and Shirley are at least playing into like being a part of the system now. Like it feels like they were like very buttoned up in terms of, not like trying to start anything, especially with their past in season 1 and 2. So who knows where this will go? But this seemed like okay, the safeguard's gonna like this storyline's gonna like exponentially get crazier. So we just kind of need everyone to be in the know to basis or on the know basis of like what the safeguard is. Like pretty much all the main characters know what the safeguard is now, which is fine. I feel like this was kind of a slow pacing start to the season. So for them to kind of do like a catch up, it's okay. But I feel like Knox and Shirley knowing could potentially be a mistake. They have ties to Mechanical. Mechanical always starts revolutions. Who knows what's going to possibly happen with that? I honestly don't even know where we're going with this silo right now. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Now we head to our tertiary storyline. We have the McLean and Orla Kent thing. So the sheriff, I'm gonna look up his name by next episode. I feel so bad. He's awesome. I love his character, but I just can't remember the name. It starts with an H, I think. Holden, I don't know. Sheriff. The main sheriff is looking into this Orla Kent matter. He's been doing this for the past couple, 3 or 4 episodes, and he gets to McLean, the head of supply, who's been kind of out of this season for some reason. She hasn't really been around much, but she claims to have known what happens to Orla Kent. So we got a little context into that. We'll dig into that later when we get the introduction to Critical Supply. So the big moment, or one of the big moments of the episode, and especially with the Juliet developments, is we get this whole squad somehow involved in this one room where like we see Kennedy and Lucas like go through a trash chute to get there, like just randomly. So I feel like this episode was a little clunky and kind of just like, okay, we need to get everyone up to speed, but it was entertaining. So in this room, we have Juliet, Walker, Sims, Lucas, Kennedy, and the relic woman, who Sims had tasked with going to get relics for Juliet. And they all try and give Juliet these little relics to remember. It's fun little callbacks throughout this seasons. Nothing too important that'll actually make her remember. So obviously, there's that whole little group that follows Juliet to death, but Robert created 10 of her badges to trade for them. And I think we actually saw a trade go down in either episode 1 or 2 of this woman trading for something from one of the girls. So that was cool to see that like pay off in some sense. But yeah, none of these relics really help Juliet. It's tough to watch because you can tell she's trying so hard, and Juliet's obviously the best character in the season. She's the whole fucking focus of the show. But it's just like you can't remember something that's not there, and it's tough to watch. And we get a good moment of Hank coming in alone, says, "I got to tell you something." She's like, "You can just stand in front of everyone." He's like, "No, I got to tell you something secret." And it's her dad had given him the watch, said, "I love Juliet so much. When she comes back, tell her I love her. She's perfect as is." They kind of had a rocky thing growing up. I think Juliet was upset with him over the treatment of the brother, if I remember correctly, and how that kind of whole situation went down with the mother and the brother. So good to see that moment. Obviously, Juliet and her father were on better terms by the time Juliet leaves the silo. However, that was a nice like closure moment for Juliet, who never got to say bye to her dad. So that was cool between Hank. But the watch does not do much. It kind of remembers, or kind of gives her memory to George, but not like the important stuff about how to stop the safeguard, which is basically all they need Juliet for. And that's what they want her to remember. And also some of the other stuff like going, she went into a whole other silo, and all you cared about is stopping the safeguard and saving yourself. How selfish of you. But yeah, they just want to learn how to stop the safeguard, because we get Bernard telling her, I don't know if this happens now or if contextually whatever, but Bernard tells her, when we walked into the airlock, he's told her they can kill anyone, or they can kill us at any time, which is like the big thematic storyline of the safeguard. They can kill us at any time. And Juliet's like, maybe not. And then she remembers, in the moment, she knows the information from Silo or Solo, and what happened in his silo, Silo, Solo. But yeah, so that was kind of the moment that Bernard was like, oh shit, I have a reason to live, because if we can stop the safeguard, he was kind of out on life. That's why he was walking out of the silo. He was going to kill her, probably just kill himself outside of the silo. But then when she said that kind of changed everything for him. So that was a cool moment to see that called back to as well. And then, in terms of the Orla Kent storyline and Sheriff, we have the intro to Critical Supply, which I think is a cool aspect of the silo. I think it's cool to just still learn more about the silo. I know we're 3 seasons in, we're kind of like above learning about like the intricacies of the silo. But you have the Critical Supply, where maybe this will factor into how I think there will probably be a scene of Daniel and Helen and their like the modern day expanding Critical Supply and what they're going to do with that. So Critical Supply is only the head of supply and the shadow of supply have access to it, and these are all the very important supplies you have and can only have a finite amount of. And I'm curious, how much years did they plan for in the silo? I don't remember where we are in the specific silo timeline. I know we're 100 years away, so if somehow Daniel and Helen are still alive in like the present day of Juliet, like I'd be shocked. Best case scenario in terms of Daniel and Helen somehow being involved in the storyline is if Daniel's like the AI voice that like talks to them, like that's his voice or something. Like I feel like they're going to be out of the picture by the time of the present day, unless they like find a book or that. It's going to be some sort of relic or something. Obviously, we have the relic of the Pez dispenser, so that might just be their legacy in the present day. But we'll have to see what happens. Anyways, back to Critical Supply. It's not only the Critical Supply. They're running low on time, because of course, we can't have these dystopian shows without running out of time. I lost the 100. I lost, every other show that's kind of like this, but they're running out of time. The light bulbs are the big thing here, where originally they had 50 years or 70 years. Then they were down to 50 years. Now people keep stealing and stealing. Now they potentially only have 2 years left on the light bulbs. So crazy stuff going on there. The farms go, we die in the dark. Super scary stuff in terms of that. Imagine if we didn't, well, we at least have outside. We have the sun rising every day, even if we ran out of light bulbs. They don't have shit. They have that little window that's fake. So we'll have to see what happens with that. That's kind of like a side. I feel like that might be the season 4 storyline that they're unlocking right now. Of like, okay, we figured out how to stop the safeguard, but now we only have 2 years left of light bulbs. We need to like come together with all the side. Like that could be, I'm writing the show for them, even though I know they already filmed season 4 and that's the last season. But maybe this season leads to like, okay, we stopped the safeguard, and we know there's other silos out there. We're running low on time. They're running low on time. Nobody knows who we are. Let's figure it out and like get all the silos together and figure out how to live on Earth, something like that. Maybe look into the future right there by the Dubcast, but who knows what's going to happen on the show. Anyways, the big moment for Juliet, the biggest moment, I already said the big moment, but the biggest moment is them on the staircase. Robert's walking Juliet back. We got to get her back to Camille, or Camille's going to blow her freaking gasket. Robert says, when you walked into the room with my son and the gun, you really screwed him up for life. But that's not what I care about. We always have this Pez dispenser, but I can't keep it emotionally. I need to show it to you because it could help you rejar some memories. And it's like that flash right before you die, when you see your whole life in 30 seconds. That's what Juliet saw. She saw everything solo. She remembers how to stop the safeguard, and she says, I remember. She says it out loud, which is on the staircase, a public place. So I'm curious to see if that will have repercussions. I feel like Silo does care about like what is said in the past and stuff. So there could be a potential safeguard, a threat imminent of Juliet saying that out loud. I feel like, am I overreacting by saying that? Because unless the AI can only listen to those 2 rooms, I guess Lucas said it to Bernard on the staircase as well, but he like blocked himself off. But Julia was clearly in the open saying, here's how we stop the safeguard. So I'm curious to see where Camille and the AI go in terms of that. But Julia remembers how to do it. There's a pipe, and she doesn't know where it is, but she's like, I got to go back to the others. So that's going to lead to Camille looking for people, and she's sending people downstairs through the pulley system. So that's going to get super interesting as we see her and Robert in a stare off, where Robert knows what's going on. I'm curious to know if Camille knows that Robert's been deceiving her all this time, it's a little stare off between those two. The marriage obviously is in the forefront of this season. What will happen between those two in terms of their relationship, in terms of their dynamics, in terms of their narrative? What will they try and be angling up with each other? Will the one make a move on each other? Did one already make a move on each other? Robert kind of stopping and taking a knee on the stairs. Sus moment. I don't know about that. So who knows what's going on with that? We'll have to see in the next coming episodes. Daniel and Helen. Was missing them this episode, to be honest. I've really come to enjoy their storyline. Obviously the Juliet is taking main center stage, and I'm okay with that. But what's happening with Daniel and Helen? Who knows? They're driving off to see their friend from the military, or Daniel's friend from the military who has some information for them, which I always thought was a little suspect. I don't know if my prediction was they were going to go to him and he's going to be dead, but maybe that was like too much of a jump of just like leading them on to nothing. But no, they have a self-driving car, and it's not self-driving. Somebody else is driving the car, and they made a point of this to show in the previously on how they bought it from someone on a lamppost. I remember in the last week's episode, they were like, we made sure to be careful that no one would be able to track us when we have this car. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. That dude who I think is suspect, the white-haired dude, I think he's behind this somehow. He's involved in this. So who knows what's going on? Will they be roped into the silo, or will they be part of the beneficiaries of it? I don't know what's going on with Daniel and Helen. Honestly, I'm excited to see where we take this. And the thing I want to talk about earlier is this going to leak into season 4, or is this going to be a contained storyline within the season explaining the beginning of the silo, and then season 4 is kind of just take it from there with Juliet's crew. So I'm curious to see, is this a 2-story development, or is this our 2-season development, or are we getting the end of this story in only 5 episodes? Honestly, at the point we're at, I think this might leak into season 4. What do you guys think? But let me know down below in the comments. And that's our big reveal. Maybe next week we get a heavy Daniel and Helen episode with their being the cliffhanger of this episode. Who knows? So as always, we'll get into my favorite and least favorite character of the episode. Favorite, probably my first ever episode giving this person favorite. I'm giving it to Robert. Easy one for me. I thought he was awesome in this episode, keeping Bernard alive, keeping Juliet alive. He was the MVP of this episode. So we're going to Robert Sims for favorite. Least favorite, there wasn't somebody I really hated that much, but we're going to go with the default, which has been a lot of the episodes this season. Camille, listening to AI, stare off with Robert, not really, rationalizing her family, caring about her family that much, always prioritizing the AI. So we're going to have to go with Camille for least favorite. Sorry, not sorry. So that's where we leave off episode 5 of Silo. We'll see you in the next 5 weeks for the rest of the Silo season 3. In terms of other things happening on the Dubcast, we were reviewing other TV shows. House of the Dragon, I'm always doing a quick reaction after the episode on Sunday nights. And then when my guests feel like joining me, we do a live stream for that. So apparently they'll be on for episode 7 and 8. So we'll have to see about that. Other TV shows coming soon. I might mix in and dabble, but honestly, doing Silo and House of the Dragon, it takes up 4 days of the week, 1 video each day. So it's kind of been exhausting me. So I don't know if I'm going to be like truly following a bunch of other TV shows, but some other stuff's coming out. Outer Banks has his last season. Ted Lasso came back for some reason. What else is coming? Mobland in the fall. You never know what you're going to get. And if you have shows you want me to watch live, I'm more than happy to listen to what the viewers say. In terms of movie reviews, always doing the old movie reviews, fitting those in where I can. Had some very interesting dialogue on the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World reviews. Whatever. I am who I am, and you won't be able to change my opinion, but I'm curious to see what you guys think, as always. And it's some good dialogue in there, some good back and forth in the comments section. So next movie reviews in terms of old ones will be Drive, Blue Velvet. I have those filmed, and then we'll also do Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and then some other like side ones. When I get to 3 like side ones that no one cares about, we'll throw those 3 in a comp video and see how that does. But yeah, and then Spider-Man Brand New Day might be the next one. I'm seeing that tomorrow night or tonight when this video comes out. So hopefully we'll rush that review and get that out for you. I'm like Monday, Tuesday, thinking on Spider-Man Brand New Day. So exciting stuff happening here on the Dubcast. I'm locking in, I'm staying up with current events. And if you care about sports, we got UFC 331 or 330, whatever the hell they're on right now. We'll be covering that with Shane, hopefully, and all the numbered events for UFC. And then we're almost back in football. But when this video comes out, it's going to be August 1st. So we'll be back in football season, August, covering the NFL on a week-to-week basis. We'll start with the preseason, win totals, stuff like that. So excited to get back to the NFL streams. tons of stuff happening here in the Dubcast. So would really appreciate everyone subscribe, like, comment, dislike, do what you got to do. Stay on social media because my videos on social media and shorts are different than how I do the long term. So this is a much more in-depth episode. But if you just want to hear short reaction, stop talking so fucking much about these shows and movies, you can catch my 1-minute movie reviews and 3-minute show reviews on short-term content. So leave y'all at that. And as always, be easy, y'all.